They didn't leave a farewell. No map, no carved symbol in stone, just silence. In 722 BCE, 10 entire tribes, thousands of people, vanished. Their cities were sacked, their leaders captured, their families marched out of the kingdom of Israel and into the heart of the Assyrian Empire. And after that, nothing. No records of their arrival, no graves, no return. The 10 lost tribes simply disappeared into history, erased by an empire known for its cruelty, feared for its power, and still poorly understood in its reach. But their disappearance was only the beginning of the mystery, because what followed would spark centuries of speculation, conspiracy, and the hope, still alive today, that their bloodline endures. To understand how such a large group of people could vanish, we have to start with the Assyrians. In the 8th century BCE, the Neo-Assyrian Empire was expanding aggressively. They were experts at warfare, brutal in conquest, and masterful in psychological domination. When the northern kingdom of Israel rebelled, Assyria responded with force. Tiglath-Pileser III, and later Shalmaneser IV, launched invasions that broke down city walls, burned crops, and deported populations. By 722 BCE, under Sargon II, Samaria, the capital, fell. What followed was mass deportation. The Assyrians had a policy: uproot the population, scatter them across distant regions, and dilute their identity so they could never rise again. They replaced the Israelites with foreign populations, later known as the Samaritans. But the Israelites themselves, those from the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Manasseh, and Ephraim, were sent eastward. And that's where the trail fades. The biblical book of Kings tells us they were taken to Hala, Habor, and the cities of the Medes. But no physical record confirms where they ended up. That silence, that absence, sparked the myth of the lost tribes. Ancient sources tried to fill in the blanks. The book of Esdras, written centuries later, claims the tribes fled further east, beyond the Euphrates, to a place called Arsareth, where they might preserve their laws in isolation. The Talmud, written by rabbis in later centuries, speculated they were hidden behind legendary rivers like the Sambation, a river that only rested on the Sabbath and could never be crossed. These weren't just myths, they were expressions of hope, wrapped in metaphor, that one day the tribes would return. Stories of their disappearance crept into Jewish messianic traditions. Prophecies about the end times often included the return of the 10 tribes, sometimes as warriors reclaiming the land of their ancestors, other times as spiritual agents of redemption. In Christian thought, especially among early Protestants, the lost tribes took on an even more mysterious significance. Some believed they would be discovered in a far-off land and converted, ushering in the second coming. Over time, religious expectation became intertwined with geopolitical fantasy. Fast forward to the age of exploration, and these legends took on new life. European explorers, colonizers, and missionaries began to report sightings of lost tribes all over the world. In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel community, Jews with ancient practices and rituals, claimed descent from the tribe of Dan. In India, the Bnei Manasseh claimed to be descendants of Manasseh. In Afghanistan, among the Pashtuns, certain tribal names resembled Hebrew words. Even in Native American nations, early European settlers insisted they found customs too familiar to ignore. The theory? The lost tribes had scattered across the world, leaving behind fragments of their language, culture, and faith. The idea fascinated monarchs, merchants, and mystics alike. When Portuguese sailors arrived in Japan and encountered highly structured social systems and dietary rules, some even whispered the Japanese could be among the descendants. In South America, missionaries speculated about Incan religious structures mimicking Jewish temples. These theories were mostly based on selective readings, coincidences, and the desire to fit the world into a biblical framework. But they persisted. And they weren't just harmless folklore. Some were used to justify colonialism and conversion campaigns. under the logic that these were lost Israelites who had to be brought home. One of the most famous theories came from the British Empire itself. Known as British Israelism, the idea claimed that the Anglo-Saxon people, specifically the British, were descendants of the lost tribes. The theory gained traction in the 19th century and even influenced parts of US and UK identity movements. Believers pointed to supposed linguistic links between Hebrew and English, heraldic symbols, and parallels between biblical prophecies and British imperial history. It was nationalism disguised as theology, and while the theory lacks academic credibility, it refuses to die. Modern archaeology has tried to bring science into the conversation, but the results are mixed. Excavations in ancient Assyrian cities like Nineveh and Khorsabad have uncovered reliefs and records of Israelite captives, but none that clearly indicate what happened to them after deportation. Some inscriptions mention population movements, but the data is incomplete. There are no mass graves, no written records of new Israelite settlements. It's as if the people were absorbed so fully, so completely, that they left no trace. Or perhaps their trace was simply missed or misidentified. That's where DNA studies come in. Over the past few decades, geneticists have worked with communities who claim descent from the lost tribes. The Lemba of southern Africa, for example, hold oral traditions of Jewish ancestry, and genetic testing revealed high frequencies of Y chromosome markers also found in Jewish priestly lines. The Bnei Menashe of northeast India also showed markers consistent with Middle Eastern ancestry. But genetics is tricky. Shared markers can arise from trade, migration, or coincidence. And critics warn against using DNA to prove heritage in ways that oversimplify complex histories. Linguistic evidence is equally murky. In some tribal languages in Africa and Asia, a few Hebrew-like words and customs do appear, but rarely in consistent, systematic ways. Still, when combined with oral history and ritual, these fragments have drawn anthropologists and religious scholars alike. Is it coincidence, cultural borrowing, or something deeper? To answer that, we have to look at the patterns not just in language, but in myth. Among all the lost tribe theories, one stands out, the tribe of Dan. Unlike the others, Dan was a tribe associated with wandering. They lived along the coast and had links to seafaring. Some scholars have connected them to the ancient sea peoples, mysterious raiders who attacked Egypt and other civilizations during the late Bronze Age. Others even link them to the story of Samson, the biblical judge from the tribe of Dan, whose hair, strength, and downfall have parallels in other Mediterranean myths. Could the tribe of Dan have left by sea long before the Assyrian exile and seeded other cultures? It's speculation, but one with intriguing fingerprints. The tribe of Dan also had strained relationships with the rest of Israel. The Book of Judges describes how they moved north to find new territory, far from their original inheritance. This act of internal migration may have foreshadowed their later disappearance. Perhaps Dan's identity was always fluid, part Israelite, part something else. And in a time of exile, that flexibility may have been their survival tool, or their undoing. And this is where the mystery deepens, because the search for the 10 lost tribes isn't just about history, it's about identity. For centuries, Jewish communities prayed for their return. Christian groups hunted for them in distant lands, and even political movements used their story to shape national myths. Every few decades, a new discovery, a genetic marker, a ritual, a word, reignites the question, are they truly lost? Or have they been hiding in plain sight all along? In the modern age, the 10 tribes remain a touchstone for communities seeking belonging. Groups like the Igbo in Nigeria, some Native American nations, and isolated Himalayan communities have all, at times, been proposed as descendants. Each claim brings scrutiny, but also a question. Why does this story matter so much? Maybe because in a world fractured by migration, identity, and diaspora, the lost tribes embody a universal longing for connection. A belief that no matter how far we're scattered, there's still a thread tying us to something ancient. The myth of the lost tribes continues to echo because it taps into something universal, the fear of disappearance and the hope of return. These people were once real, fathers, mothers, children, who lived, farmed, worshipped and vanished. But their memory became more powerful than their presence. They became a canvas on which generations projected their hopes, fears and identities. And maybe that's the real reason the mystery still matters today. Because in every culture that has claimed descent, there's a story not just of loss, but of survival. The 10 tribes might not return on clouds or cross miraculous rivers, but their legacy lives on, in belief, in memory, and maybe, just maybe, in blood. The trail may have gone cold in the sands of Assyria, but the search has never stopped. And as long as that mystery remains open, the 10 lost tribes of Israel will never be entirely forgotten.